Hi, I'm Vicky, and today we're going to talk a little bit about learning in the manufacturing environment. Specifically, we're going to talk about identifying at least two key learning methodologies when you are designing for a manufacturing environment. Also, we're going to talk about some of the issues or concerns surrounding modality, or how are you going to get that learning delivered to your learners. And finally, favorite part, we're going to talk about measurement. We're actually going to cover all four levels, which we traditionally don't do, but for the purpose of this video, to give you as much information as I can in this module, I'm going to go ahead and cover all four levels. Stay tuned. Selection of the learning method is really an in-depth discovery, if you will, as you go through the analysis or the upfront analysis portion of your project. However, right now we're going to focus on knowledge, skills, and attitude. So the first thing you need to identify really is, what performance are you trying to impact with this learning intervention? Is there knowledge to be gained? Is there a skill that one would now take on? Or is there an attitude that maybe needs to be impacted? Perhaps there's a combination of the KSA attributes. Is this informational? Is it a policy change? Do we need to really modify behaviors, or perhaps there really is a new skill that the learner needs? Is this a new skill, a new process, a new machine, new equipment, new software? Is something being modified so there's already something in place, but you're going to do something a little different? Those are the things you need to consider initially when identifying the learning method. Pretty well-known concept within the manufacturing industry is the lean concept. I like to apply that in my learning interventions in a focus of keeping things simple. I like to focus on waste, make sure that the learning is directed towards the performance outcome, that any unnecessary distractions have been removed. That includes superfluous information that's not going to help the learner. Is the learner engaged? Are they actively participating, listening, taking in the information? Want to be sure to add value to that learner. Keep the learning learner centered. Make sure that the learner is kept at the forefront of your mind as you develop a learning methodology. As you identify a learning methodology, you want to manage time. You want to make sure you provide performance support in the effect that perhaps the learning needs to be recalled at a later time and date. You want to be sure your learner has some type of reference or some type of tool that he or she can now actively engage. Keep the learning relevant. When identifying modality, I sort of design with the learner in mind. How does a learner need to learn? Keeping in mind that everyone learns differently, I consider blended solutions in an effort to reach a larger audience, different learning styles. Some people like to touch, some people like to hear and see, things of that nature. So I want to really try to hone in on those specific learning inputs for the individuals. Also, consider if you can simulate the learning in the actual workspace. Is it safe to do so? That might be a consideration as you're identifying the modality. Again, we need to identify the knowledge, skill, or attitude that needs to be impacted. What does the learner need to be able to do, explain, or exhibit? Typically in manufacturing, there are a lot of process-driven activities, a lot of skills being impacted. There may be need to modify or change knowledge or increase knowledge about particular machine or equipment or software. We would possibly touch any one of these particular learning needs. What does learner need? What's the frequency of the performance? How often does it happen? Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it every 6 months? Or is it just something that happens every once in a while? And with that in mind, when does a learner need to be able to access or recall this information, this skill, this process? Do we have performance support in place that will allow just-in-time access? Is this a new process? Is it a new system, new equipment? Many things to consider. You'll need to give huge consideration to the resources impacted by the learning intervention, the people, time, money, your audience, who is impacted, how many people are going to be participating, what are the costs associated with the learning if it takes place outside of the workspace? Is there a classroom? Is there a simulation space available? Do people have to travel? What and where is the current workspace? Is it safe to perhaps use as an alternative? Is there management support? That's really huge. What is the attitude or the environment that the learner is in? All of these things will go to create barriers or remove barriers, and we need to be a part of that as we identify the modality. Non productive hours really are productive when learning is taking place. We just need to show that value add with the modality that we choose. Okay, I have a question. How urgent is your learning need? I mean, is it something that needs to take place right now? Is there a safety concern? Perhaps we can do some one-on-one, quick intervention, some coaching, something like that. Is this something that has a timeline associated with it, perhaps a go live date, something to that effect, where there's an extended timeline that we can manage the modality to? That's going to have a huge impact on what type of learning is made available. If you have more time, obviously you're going to probably have more moving parts or more components with your learning intervention. If you don't have as much time, oftentimes you'll resort to perhaps some type of performance aid or some real quick one-on-one a support or assistance, right? If you do have some more time, you can develop some much more complex solution for the training need. Let's talk quickly about tools as they impact modality. Let's look at what technology is in place that will support learning. Does the learner, for example, have direct access to a computer at his or her workstation? Is there a tablet or a smartphone the learner has access to? Are there limitations in terms of how and when the learner can access information? Those things will go into play as you identify your delivery modality. Okay, favorite part is measuring the success of your learning intervention. Level one, as most folks would call it, that's the reaction. How did the learner react initially to the learning? Did they like it? Was there conversation in the room about what was going on or on the job, wherever the learning took place? Was it relevant? Did the learner feel it was something that they could take back to their workspace? When do you get this? You get it immediately. You get that feedback right away. There are a number of tools you can use to do so. A lot of folks will use what they call a smiley sheet or a program evaluation. It's a quick survey, somewhere between 5 and 10 questions about what was learned, the environment, the delivery, the facilitator, or whatever methodology was used. You could also do surveys. You can do them anonymously online. You can do an interview. You can even do participant comments. And we move quickly into level two, which is all about learning. What was learned? Was it relevant? Was the learner actually able to apply the learning intervention in the workspace? When do we do this? Well, we actually can measure before and after learning intervention. Traditionally, we would use a pre-test and a post-test just to gauge any type of movement. Hopefully, scores are moving in a positive or favorable direction, indicating that the learning intervention did add value. Also, we could consider a peer review where someone would objectively observe the learner in the work environment, producing or meeting performance expectations, and being able to document that, yes, this person has performed and meets or exceeds expectations. A supervisor could also step in and perform something like that as well. So that's something to consider with the level two evaluation. Level three is super exciting. It's all about behavior. Has learning become part of the workflow? Has there been movement in a measurement performance indicator saying that, yes, this learning has been incorporated into our day-to-day processes? When do we actually measure level three? Generally, it's around 3 to 6 months after the learning event has taken place. That gives time for the learning to become second nature or to become more commonplace for the learner. How do we measure? Well, there's a few tools we can use. You might want to go back and interview some of the learners that have completed the learning intervention. You could observe the learner in the workplace, documenting specific outcomes, expected outcomes. Consider a focus group. It's really nice to get a group of people together who are now all doing something new and kind of talk about what works, what doesn't work. It's a great time also to circle back with your learning, and you get that instant feedback to say, let me modify or change the way that I did this or that. So that kind of goes back to the modality. Maybe you didn't deliver it in the way that they needed, or maybe there were some missing components. So this is a good time to uncover that information. Also, you can do another survey. It would be absolutely much more in depth than the survey we use in level 1. It's no longer a smiley sheet, but it's really more very deliberate questions, looking for some sincere feedback. You might even consider doing some open-ended questions to allow the user to give you much more candid feedback. But that's the level 3 in a nutshell. Hi there, it's Vicky, your favorite instructional designer. I thought I would go ahead and jump back into the course here and have a little FaceTime with you. I wanted to talk a little bit in depth about level 4. Level 4 is probably going to give you the most value add when you look at your management team, the directors, the vice presidents, things of people of that stature, whom are funding learning activities, etc., probably responsible for processes, manufacturing, numbers, sales numbers, things of that nature. The thing with level 4 is a lot of times business doesn't really allow you to get there, although it should always be the goal. But level 4 is really all about specific, measurable business impact. So I think most folks would say the return on investment. So what's my ROI? What's my bottom line? How did you help me to save money or to do things with a higher level of quality? Well, you're going to do some trending, looking at things that have changed or moved. When do you do it? Well, generally, it takes anywhere from 6 to 12 months to really be able to even gauge if anything significant has moved when you're talking about trends. I would say even a year or more before you can actually approach the level 4, depending on what the particular trend is. Some things you might want to measure is quality. Have your performance indicators moved any inequality? Do you find that the line is producing at a much better level because of the intervention? And now we can't necessarily directly tie any of these items back to the learning intervention. However, you can certainly present a really strong business case around how the learning intervention did tie into improved quality metrics, or perhaps we're looking at kappa incidences. Perhaps we have impacted, we have zero nonconformance rate. I don't know. We could also look at things like customer satisfaction surveys. Perhaps customer satisfaction has just jumped tremendously in the last 6 to 9 months. Perhaps the learning intervention has impacted customer satisfaction, and also a fabulous indicator is sales performance. Perhaps our sales have really dramatically increased, let's say 10, 15, 20, 25% in the last year. If we look at last year, fiscal year last year and fiscal year this year, those are the metrics that we're looking at when we're talking about level 4 in a manufacturing environment specifically. So I hope that this module has been beneficial to you. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed my time with you. Please, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. This is Vicky signing off. Have a great one.